right, good morning, everyone. We're going to get started. So glad that you've joined us this morning. Welcome to Homeward Bound, VICA's housing panel of the business forecast. I'm Carmel Sella, Senior Director, Local Government Relations for Wells Fargo, which is very proud to be the presenting sponsor of the Business Forecast Conference today. Let's thank our track sponsors this morning, Mission Community Hospital and Pacific Federal, as well as panel sponsor Southland Regional Association of Realtors. I'm very excited to be here today on behalf of Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo is deeply committed to housing and is a leader in financing housing across various housing types, from for-sale housing, single-family housing, to affordable and market rate housing, which you'll be hearing about this morning. Last year, Wells Fargo provided in LA County $1.4 billion in home mortgage loans, $244 million in community investment in affordable housing, and over $50 million in multifamily capital. In my role at Wells Fargo, I work closely on housing issues and identifying solutions to the region's housing needs. And prior to joining Wells Fargo, I was a deputy mayor and held other roles in City Hall, and appreciate the complexity of this issue, which we'll be diving into in this morning's session. We have an impressive panel today representing a range of housing stakeholders, private, nonprofit, and government. And I know this morning will be very informative to all of us. The bios of each of the panelists are already in the journal, so I'm going to provide just very brief introductions so that we have more time for your questions. Gabe Hungerford, Senior Vice President, Trammell Crow, and VICA board member. Bob Kalsa, President, Southland Regional Association of Realtors. Azeen Khanmalek, Executive Director, Abundant Housing, and William Landborn, Director of Planning, Policy, and Development for Mayor Bass. Thank you all for being here today.
Absolutely.
California's housing market faces numerous challenges that all of us in this room are very familiar with, from financial limitations to local government planning and zoning constraints. This panel will explore the barriers to housing development and discuss ways for creating sustainable and affordable housing through local and state policy proposals. Our panelists will consider the role of housing insurance in the housing landscape, addressing what influences development and accessibility. This discussion will provide insights into critical factors shaping the future of housing. I'm going to give each of the panelists a couple of minutes to make an opening statement to get things started, and then I'm going to ask some targeted questions of each of you and open it up for questions, time permitting. Periodically, I'll be looking at my phone, and I promise I'm not looking at TikTok or Politico. I'm just trying to keep track of time as we have so much to cover and not a lot of time. So with that, I'll turn to our panelists for brief opening statements. Gabe?
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us at this panel. We're excited about track 2 and hope you are as well. My name, again, is Gabe Hungerford. I'm a Senior Vice President at Trammell Crow Company and also our residential subsidiary, High Street Residential. My job is sourcing, shaping, entitling, and financing ground-up multifamily projects across Southern California, and in particular, LA County and the Valley. I've actually been working for the last 8 years on a multi-phase mixed-use project in North Hollywood with our friends here at the Los Angeles Metropolitan Transit Authority, or Metro as they're better known, and that's a 1,500-unit project with 25% income restricted units that we've had the pleasure of getting fully approved this year. Yes, it's very exciting. Just went through the Metro board, so big shout out to Metro. Anyway, we're excited to bring that experience to this panel and talk to you all about that today.
Great, thank you. William?
Sure, thanks, and thanks, Gabe. Thanks, everybody. My name's Will Lamborn. I am with the Mayor's Office for Mayor Karen Bass. I'm the Director of Planning, Policy, and Development within our Office of Business and Economic Development. So in my role, our team is fundamentally responsible for working with both the Planning Department, the Department of Building and Safety, on really the full scope of their work programs as it relates to land use and planning and housing, to be sure that the city departments are, doing their work and advancing the agenda of the mayor, representing our office in all of their work programs. So that ranges everything from their broader citywide ordinances to working with constituents with, housing or planning related items. And, certainly housing, as you all know, has been a very big focus of our administration since its very, very early days with Executive Directive 1, later ED7, lots of other things that we're working on. So just very, very excited to be here with this panel and talk about all of these things here today with you. And thanks to Vika for the opportunity for the conversation. And I love the North Hollywood project shout out. Before my time in the mayor's office, I was with planning for many, many years and got to work on that with Gabe from the department side as well. So it is very exciting. And I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bob?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Bob Carlson. I'm president of Southland Regional Association of Realtors. And I thank Vika for this opportunity to be here on the panel. I own a real estate brokerage, and we deal with commercial, residential, sales and leasing, as well as property management and land development. So with every aspect of housing, I'm well associated with, and I understand the problems right from the time from you plan to permitting, to construction, to development, to sale, to resale, and renting. And those are the issues that impact each and every one of you. Affordability in housing is not only to buy a house. Affordability in housing is once you own the house, now you face up to realities of changing insurance premiums, higher utility costs. So you got to take a holistic view of everything. You can't deal with one issue at one time. You create a development, you need infrastructure also. So we deal with all that, and we're going to discuss that. And I'm glad to be a part of this panel, and I think a lot of answers will come up today. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Azim, last but not least.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Azim Khan Malik. I'm the Executive Director of Abundant Housing LA. Abundant Housing LA is a nonprofit organization dedicated to advocating for more housing at all levels of affordability throughout LA County. And I would say, crucially, our vision is we envision an LA County in which everyone has access to a home they can afford in the neighborhood of their choice. We do this work through 4 core programmatic areas. We invest a lot in community organizing, policy research and advocacy, educational programs, and political support of pro-housing elected local candidates throughout LA County. I like to say that we are an all of the above organization. We view the housing crisis as a spectrum and housing as a continuum, and we need to be providing for more support all along that continuum, from supportive housing all the way up through ownership opportunities, in order to make sure every household has access to a home they can afford.
Thank you. And such a knowledgeable and experienced panel, so looking forward to our discussion. And I'm going to start posing questions, and like a presidential debate, feel free to not attack one another, but question one another, engage with one another, and just have a free-flowing discussion. So Gabe, I'll turn to you first. Rising costs are impacting market rate housing production significantly, as we all know. What strategies or policy changes can make these projects more viable for private developers, especially considering the high cost of permitting and construction? And there's a subpart. And how can developers adapt to these increased costs? And what makes partnerships or financing strategies, or what partnership or financing strategies could help make projects more feasible?
Sure, absolutely. Well, there's a lot to unpack in that question. So, but before I do that, maybe what I should do is talk a little bit about how we got to where we are right now and kind of paint the picture that we see on the front lines on the development business. I mean, just talking about costs. So in 2022 and 2023, we had 2 years of back-to-back double-digit construction cost escalation, right? And that base of where costs are is the same as it is today, and costs are going up a little bit slightly even more, right? So the level that we started at right now is basically unsustainable for a lot of projects. Then what we also had was the double whammy of interest rates. So the real cost of financing and above the Fed rate has basically doubled. And so that's become a real challenge for projects as well. So you have those kind of 2 things, and then add to that the fact that investors are asking for a higher rate of return. Realistically, something like, when you think about rent growth included, basically 200 basis points more spread on their investments for these assets. So that's a really, really challenging place to underwrite a multifamily project. And the reality is, we're in a very long lead time business, right? So the decisions that we see coming to the starting line today were made 2-3 years ago, and not every project has the ability to adapt, right? And so what we're actually seeing is a massive drop in starts. So this year, by our research, multifamily starts are down 70% from last year. We're only tracking 14 starts in all of LA County. 4 of those are 100% affordable. 8 of them are mixed income projects, over 100 units, and that's in the 10 million person LA County. So what's actually going to happen is we're really facing a supply cliff, that in 2 or 3 years, there's not going to be a lot of deliveries, and our housing issue is going to become even more acute from a rent standpoint. So that's why this topic is so important for us. It's not just that we're crying foul on all the added costs of development, which you may hear from folks, but really that background is so important. Okay, so what can we do from a policy standpoint? I mean, one thing that we can always do is make things go faster, right? So entitlements is a huge challenge. Anything we can do to find ministerial pathways to avoid things like CEQA without getting CEQA reform at the state level, which is not going to happen in the near term, let's say. Those are things that I know certain cities are working on, the city of LA is working on, that are really gonna help expedite new projects. Then we have a whole host of projects that are already entitled, that are ready to go, that may need a design change, they may need a little help to reconfigure the project. Those projects should be given like an expedited pathway to make those changes, because those are the projects that have a sponsor, they have plans, they have entitlements, they're basically the most ripe for development, and there should be incentives to help them along the way, and really teams of people really just to make sure that that's happening. So that's something that we really see as a benefit to the projects that are the closest to the starting line. We also have a ton of fees, and I think what's hard to conceptualize for most people is that the impact of an incremental fee may be the difference between the project penciling or not. And I know that seems crazy because you look at a project and it's 150 million, and you think that an extra 7,000 a unit isn't going to break the back of the project perhaps, but it absolutely can, because that's how fine things are. And I think the underwriting challenges that we have that lead up to that situation make those incremental changes the difference between whether something starts or not. And it may be that the project still pencils, right? But even that 1 degree of it being less attractive in the host of things that investors can choose can cause that project not to go. So how can we stop that? How can we put a pause on that? Maybe there can be some fee deferrals, right? Can we push those fees to later in the project? Can we find a way to reduce them? Those things really can help. And all those little things tend to actually add up to something bigger. I think policy needs to understand the urgency and the severity of the situation, because that supply cliff is already forming, right? So we're building a problem today right now with the lack of starts. On the developer side, like, developers are creative. We want to do projects. We really are incentivized to do them. So I think now more than ever, we're looking at things like reducing parking, finding ways to be more efficient in projects, anything that we can do to get costs out of the project and still deliver something that meets the needs of the market. We're highly focused on that. We're also focused on creative deal structuring, right? So there's a lot of developers out there who've got great projects that they've managed to get to the point where they're about to start, but maybe they don't have the capital to do it. So we're looking at a lot of joint venture opportunities, a lot of ways to leverage our platform and the balance sheet to kind of help those things move along. And we're doing that all across Southern California, from San Diego, out to the Valley and beyond. So I think creativity is the name of the game right now, and recognizing that the more creative we can be in looking at some of the assumptions that we had from the past and reevaluating them is really what's going to allow us to get more projects built and help us avoid that pressure on rents that hurts everyone.
Great, thank you. Gabe, you talked about that sense of urgency and awareness of the severity of the housing issues, and certainly from day one, Mayor Bass has conveyed that sense of urgency. So, Will, I'm going to ask you a question related to that. Executive Directive 1 seeks to streamline affordable housing production by reducing bureaucratic barriers, some of which Gabe just mentioned. How has ED1 influenced development so far, in your view? And what do you anticipate for the future of mixed income housing under this directive?
Great, yeah, thanks for that, and thanks for the question. I think it is a really good one to sort of build off what Gabe was sharing. And I do think that, as you alluded to, the mayor has very much made addressing this crisis with urgency, with the utmost attention, one of the most critical priorities of our office since her very first days in office. Executive Directive 1, which you've mentioned, was indeed signed back in December of 2022, right at the very beginning, and does do, I think, a really incredible different step in the way that we can streamline city processes in the development of 100% affordable housing. It is dedicated, solely to projects that are 100% affordable. It also is able to do so based on a very specific kind of legal framework and authority. In doing so, the mayor declared a declaration of a state of emergency related to housing and homelessness, and we certainly do see that emergency all the way around us in varying ways and continuums and degrees. And so what ED1, because of that, is able to do is to really waive a lot of the things that Gabe was talking about for projects that otherwise would have to go through some of these lengthier, riskier, more uncertain discretionary processes, including environmental review and CEQA, to not have to do so long as they're zoning compliant and sort of color within the lines, so to speak. You can't do it with a general plan amendment. You can use state density bonus and some other incentive programs, but you have to be compliant with what the general plan and zoning is planned out for a site and be a multifamily site. So, you get, instead of doing months or maybe even years of CEQA review, you're not doing CEQA. You don't have the risk of appeals. You don't have to go to discretionary commissions and boards. You don't have the litigation risk that comes with all of those processes and CEQA and all of those things. So with that, even just since December 2022, I think at this point we're somewhere in and around 25,000 affordable housing units proposed through the program, and 15,000 of those approximately approved by the city planning department. So I think it has sort of shown an ability to ramp this up at a meaningful scale as well in a very short period of time. It is a temporary program because of the state of emergency. There is a permanent ordinance that's before the council for consideration that could make aspects of this permanent as well. But in terms of time savings, what we've seen the planning department in these processes that otherwise could take months or even years complete their reviews in fewer than 60 days. I think their average, which is what's mandated in the measure, and I believe their average has hovered generally around 45 days or so throughout the life of the program. It is important to note, as we do get questions sometimes from developers, even within this shorter time period scope of, why are things taking so long, is that is 60 days with the city. It's not 60 days total. There's always back and forth. Sort of applications get complete and materials get refined, but it is a very, very short and certain process compared to what folks normally would have to go through to get these projects approved. And then sort of in the allusion to sort of where do we go from here and how might this continue to affect mixed income housing and affordable housing. Again, ED1 is temporary. There's a permanent ordinance. There also are lots of things that we're trying to do as ED1 is very focused specifically on 100% affordable housing to also support mixed income housing and housing, at a range of accessibility points. About a year after ED1, the mayor also signed Executive Directive 7, which, because it's focused on mixed income housing, cannot rely upon the same emergency authority and waive all of these things out of the zoning code. But what it can do is try to find ways to get through more simplified CEQA processes and addressing some of our thresholds of significance for construction processes in CEQA, trying to find ways to tier more off programmatic CEQA documents so that individual projects don't have to start from scratch when they're reviewing, doing their environmental review. Through all these things, we're also focused a lot on sort of working across our development services departments, and sort of our role and authority as the chief executive. So finding ways to make sure that folks are communicating and working together across our 12 or so departments that have to review projects when they come through. It's very, very complicated and incremental change, but also change that's important. And then, a lot of our with our legislative partners in the council, working through a lot of programs this fall, including those that relate to the housing element that are explicitly focused on meeting our housing goals through incentive programs and mixed income housing in particular. So there's a lot going on, a lot that we're engaged with, but I think we're doing what we can on the planning and zoning side of things where we have that authority to spur housing development, spur housing production. It's a very, very important priority for us.
Great, thank you. And I think the power of those executive directives is not only what it does, in nuts and bolts in real terms, but also showing what's possible. There was such a view that we can't do things faster. This is as fast as we can go, or we need to go through all these processes. So really remarkable progress in a very short.
Can I comment on this?
Of course.
Okay, so a couple of things. CEQA has come up a number of times. We created CEQA. It didn't come from another planet. We created it. We waived CEQA first time in living memory of most people here in '94 when we had the Northridge earthquake. Freeways had to come up. How did they come up? We waived CEQA. We waived CEQA when we had, I wouldn't say Taylor Swift had to give a performance. She's one of my favorites, though Dua Lipa has actually replaced her. But SoFi Stadium got constructed because CEQA was set aside, a number of features of CEQA. That's how it came up, because there was a public need. If you want housing, waive CEQA, you'll get housing faster. And I work with developers, and I can tell you, this has been 3 years and 2 months, and we are still battling a number of issues for a development that's only 75 homes. Not even talking about a bigger development. That's one. The other issue which was brought up was costs. You have two kinds of costs in development: labor and cost of stock. Cost of stock, let me give you an example. Take a look at your clothes you're wearing. I would actually, wager that every single item that you have on is manufactured outside this country. Even the innerwear is manufactured across the border. Fruit of the Loom doesn't have any place here. Hanes doesn't have any manufacturing here. Your cost of production is based on shipping costs, entry into ports. Where COVID came in, suddenly, we had constraints on supply chain issues. Costs spiraled upwards. They're not under our control. We get the end result of the product. So when costs go up, and now you look at labor, your labor has left the state a lot of labor. And try to get your handyman that you had somebody, or try to have your plumber coming in which you're familiar with, the chances are they're gone from here. And then you've got to choose between union labor. I'm not against union labor, but union labor and any other labor that is there. So these costs are going out of control, and we can't control them. You need a political will to address this, and then you get costs under control. Thank you.
Thank you for that. It's good comments. And Bob, I'm going to keep the focus on you,
Okay.
but switch gears to home ownership and for sale housing, which is so critical to keeping the stability of communities. As you know, affordability remains a major hurdle for home ownership and generational wealth. What steps or incentives do you believe could reduce financing and down payment challenges, making home ownership more accessible in high-cost areas such as Los Angeles?
So two major issues, one of which you can have a whole day, and that is your increase the supply. Increase the supply, and because you have a demand which far outweighs the supply. California right now is not even constructing the houses that you need each year, so your gap is widening between the demand and supply. That's a bigger issue, and I think that's going to get addressed down the line. The other issue is make it easier for people to buy. What do they need? They need help with finance. So what are the options you've got? We came out of the DREAM program, where you had $300 million that was set aside by the state, and that disappeared in 11 days. Then they came up with the second tranche, and that they said, okay, it's not first come, first served. It is going to be, we're going to do the selection, but that money is also running out. The thing is, the state needs to step in. Our budget goes in billions of dollars, and we only allocate a minuscule amount for housing. So it is the will of the legislature and the governor in Sacramento at the state level to provide those funds, because you can't have that volume of funds being generated at the county and the city level. So you need those funds, and it's not a loan. It's not a grant. It's a form of a loan where they have, it's like equity sharing, right? They give you 20% down payment assistance, and then when you sell, they will get the 20% back, plus they'll share the appreciation to the extent of 20% of what the property appreciated. So they're getting the money back, and once this process starts, then it's not you'll have a corpus of money allocated, which will keep recycling itself, and that is what needs to be given higher priority. The other one that you got at a local level is down payment assistance programs, which are more like grants, which are there from cities and counties. And then, of course, you've got financing, which can be made cheaper for the buyer through, you've got a thing like, 401k match, right? If you have employers that come forward and say, you know what, here's a benefit for you, we'll match your down payment, we'll give you assistance, and that can be paid back through various ways, including at the time that you leave or is worked into the benefits package. Or you make low interest. Low interest loans would mean somebody would have to subsidize, whether it's a government or public, and there are a number of avenues that you can do that, and it is being done. When you put all this together, you will get home ownership becoming more affordable. And the reason you need to concentrate on this is there are only two things that make this country really great with a firm foundation: home ownership, in which you build your wealth, and small businesses, and they are interlinked with each other. So I would say not going into other areas like insurance, and there are a whole lot of other, but that would take time. If you concentrate on these two, you would make home ownership more affordable to a large number of people.
Thank you so much.
I would say that I think homeownership also needs to look different. The single-family detached home cannot be the future of ownership in California any longer. Like, we need to be thinking about row homes, townhomes, condos, and there are a lot of people smarter than me thinking about why California has some of the lowest condo production rates in the country, with construction defect liability and a whole host of other issues. But at least from our perspective at Abundant Housing, facilitating these new typologies of ownership, I think, is also going to be a really important piece of the puzzle.
Great, thank you. And Azine, and I promise it's not if you speak, the question
No,
then
yeah,
comes to
no,
you.
it's
But
just,
as it happens, the question will be coming to you.
Bob set the stage here.
Rezoning and housing elements are essential for expanding housing options. What zoning changes or areas of focus do you see as most promising for increasing housing production to meet LA's future needs?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So, obviously, I don't think it's a secret to anyone in this room, how far behind we are in meeting our housing goals, both locally and at the county level and at the statewide level. And, we have been, as advocates, we've been really appreciative of the recent, I would say, even sea change in the way the state approaches the regulatory environment as it relates to keeping cities accountable for how much housing they are zoning for and producing. So we have a suite of accountability mechanisms at the state level, SB 35, SB 423. We have HCD publishing guidelines, taking things like how jurisdictions are crafting their sites inventories a lot more seriously. And, we think that's really important, right? And, that's what has led to the SCAG region's RENA goals for the sixth cycle housing element be gigantic, right? 1.2 million homes across the SCAG region, 800,000 units in LA County, and LA City is shouldering about 50% of that, 456,000 plus units. So I promise, Will, I'm not just picking on the city of LA. It's the most convenient example. But I think again, from our perspective as advocates, what we are seeing is even really good actor jurisdictions like the city of LA. The city of LA is probably the best actor jurisdiction in the state of California when it comes to housing policy. But from our perspective, what we see is even good actor jurisdictions are reiterating the same patterns that we've seen over and over again in the past, which is to say, multifamily housing is going to be allowed in some handful of neighborhoods, and we are not really going to touch the bulk of the city, in which that is basically limited to single-family homes or other types of low-density zoning restrictions. And we think that's a problem for a couple of reasons. I would say one, there is we see it from an equity perspective. We have seen, LA has an extremely segregated pattern of land use and is an extremely racially segregated city. And, there are a handful of neighborhoods that have seen successive waves of displacement because we are driving all of the development pressure to a handful of neighborhoods in which you can build multifamily housing. And so if we want to build more housing and reduce the tension of displacement, we have to open up our historically exclusionary neighborhoods to more multifamily housing development. And again, I'm not picking on the city of LA. This applies to every jurisdiction in LA County. LA City is just the big boy in our region, of course. And we think that's also important from a climate perspective, right? In order to adapt and mitigate to climate change, we have to be building more units near transit, more units in walkable communities, and saying, oh, well, we're just gonna like slap all of our units onto the commercial corridors is not gonna do it, because a 3-mile long commercial corridor is not a walkable or bikeable neighborhood. And if you live 2 miles away from the train station that's over here on your commercial corridor, you're not gonna walk to the train, you're not gonna take the train, right? So we need to be building more walkable, dense neighborhoods, particularly in our high resource and historically exclusionary neighborhoods. And I would say that the second factor in all this is we need to be realistic in how much housing we're actually going to build and what the next steps are, right? So zoned capacity is 1/2 of the equation here, right? We have to get rid of our restrictive zoning regulations. We have to allow more housing, but okay, so we plan for 500,000 some odd units, let's say in LA City. I mean, we're not going to build 500,000 units by 2029, right? Like that's clearly not going to happen. So, what are the next steps to unlocking or facilitating housing production? And so, I think things like ED1 are extremely promising. I'm biased. I worked in the mayor's office when we wrote ED1 and got it going. No, but seriously, as Will said, 25,000 units entering the pipeline in the first 2 years of this program, and we've been doing some early research on the ED1 pipeline, and some of our research at Abundant Housing is showing that something like 2/3, up to 70% of these projects are privately financed. 100% affordable. I think there are a lot of questions that remain, right, about this pipeline, or, are they for real, or is some percentage of them real estate arbitrage? Are they gonna get financing? Is a bank gonna say, yeah, I'll finance your deed restricted 100% affordable project that has no, public subsidy? So, there are some questions that remain, but I think what it points to me is that the sheer lack of friction is bringing in non-traditional players in this space, right? So I think things like that can really point the way forward to us, right? The importance of setting the stage and having a regulatory environment in terms of land use policy that is allowing for housing is one piece of the puzzle. We need to take the next step after that, which is to say, a lack of friction on the permit side, on the entitlement side, as well as, as some of the other speakers pointed out, like the various drivers of cost as well.
I couldn't agree more with that, right? I think there's a couple things in there that are really important. If you look at inventory lists for cities, some of the smaller cities, right, they'll say that they're getting their capacity, and then you'll drill down and you'll say, okay, there's a 4-acre site. And then you'll look at it and it's a Ralph's.
Yeah.
And it's like, am I really going to get the political will to eliminate this community asset to build housing? Okay, well, that capacity is not real.
Yeah.
And so I think if cities really want to take seriously local control and maintaining a semblance of local control throughout this planning process, which is state driven, right? But they're leaving it to the cities to decide how to implement it. They have to be smart about it. And they have to be realistic about it, because what's going to happen is you're going to continue to have these unintended consequences where local control and the state continue to spar. And it's easy for our elected officials at the local level, depending on what city you live in, to say, oh, this is the state, they're taking away our rights. Every city's been given an opportunity to rise to the occasion to figure out how to deliver housing.
Yeah.
Right? And so it starts with the planning, and then it starts with the action plan on how to do it. And I think cities also get a bad rap from folks like myself, maybe inadvertently, or like, we certainly work with them. They're our partners, but there tends to be this adversarial relationship. I think when you really get to know staff, what staff wants to do is get projects off their desk, right? We need to make it easier for staff to have throughput, and that's breaking down those bureaucratic barriers, because that's really what's going to get things built. There's nothing worse than staff working on a project that makes it through a long, arduous entitlement process, and then it doesn't get built. That's the worst. And I feel for them. I feel for anyone involved in that. So how can we make it easier for them to do their job and streamline the process so they can take these good ideas and just make it happen? And you're right, there are a lot of new entrants in that space, in the 100% affordable. There's a bunch of people that are new, and we don't know if they're real, but you're right. They're there because the opportunity is there. And that's all just on the front end, because we can say that financing those 100% affordable projects with completely private money is actually quite challenging. But they're able to find sites at a very good price, right, in markets where there really weren't opportunities before, and they're able to do it so quickly and at scale for a lot of these smaller players that it becomes a new investment strategy. And you're starting to find investors from out of state that are saying, okay, California's tough, LA's even tougher, but there's this new pathway, and I think we can scale it. And you're starting to see that benefit. So it's very exciting, and those policy things starting to work. It starts with that friction going away in smart planning.
Just want to add something here that, and people need to understand affordability. Affordability as defined as it's affordable if it's 80% of the area median income, which means 80% area median income is critical, and you need to understand what happened here. 2019 area median income of LA city area was $619,000. That's the median income for housing was $619,000. A few months back, it was $1,025,000. What does it mean? If you take 25% of the median income, that's the income level you need to qualify to buy the house. It's a rough calculation. Let's say it's $800,000 median income, median price. The housing median level is at $800,000. Your income level has to be $200,000. Think about it. You're at $1,025,000 for entire LA city. Where does that put people? How many people are going to have $250,000 of income, including in the whole household? So the affordability is not only related to the housing, it's also related to job growth and high-paying jobs. So the two are interconnected. That's why when I said small business is the foundation of this country, it's actually the fundamental for people to own houses. And so when you look at this, also look at when you say, why isn't there more affordable housing? LA requires about 500,000 units of affordable housing. When a developer makes affordable housing, you know what LA City does? It makes it deed restricted for about 55 years. That means that house cannot be sold or done in the free market rate. It has to be at that income level, so it's deed restricted. What does that do? The developer who's constructing that doesn't get the return that he's looking at, and therefore needs low-income housing tax credits, different kinds of financing. It becomes more and more complicated, and the lead time to construct those kind of properties increases tremendously. Not all developers are savvy or qualified enough or even want to get into the space. So that becomes a smaller pool of people who construct this kind of housing, and now you have this problem that you don't meet the demand. So it's just not one issue. They're all connected.
Thank you for that. And really, truly, it's a complete ecosystem of housing, and that's why it's so important that we have a range of panelists representing different aspects of the issue. So many issues have already been put on the table, and an encouraging note is from this very critical and challenge time, I'm hearing about new approaches, new players, so there is some reason for optimism. You've all been very good listeners, but we want to switch the focus to you and see what questions people have.
I've worked as a land use consultant and permit expediter in Los Angeles for about 20 years. It seems like the state laws in ED1, all targeting density bonus provisions, are all focused on pre-submittal and pre-plan check. It's in the entitlement phase and getting things going to plan. Then when you submit plans, all hell breaks loose. You get sent to all 12 different departments, and it seems like there's not much help at state and local to help fast track the plan check process. 12 departments that sign off and moving it down to just planning and building and safety. Has anyone looked at that in recent times? And then I have one more follow-up. ED1 provisions are limited to 100% affordable housing projects. Every site in the city is different. They all have their own challenges. So having a by right project that's limited to 100% limits the amount of help we can get from ED1 and only focuses on a small number of sites and types of projects. So I think there's a possibility and an opportunity to expand ED1 to all types of housing projects that include an affordable component. And that I think will help. Also, if you can add the ED1 clearance requirements, because on ED1 I think departments have a certain time when they're supposed to issue clearances. If you can add that into all housing projects, it'll speed up your time in plan check. And then my last one, I think I'll keep it just like that. I had one on the linkage fee bill.
Well, I'm happy to start there, and that's more than enough to dig into a little bit. But yeah, I think the front-loaded and sort of the plan check issues are interesting to talk about, and would be very curious about the experiences of others up here. I mean, I do know from the city side, and I think also with some of the processes, as you noted, that the state's asking us to do locally are sort of front-loading more requirements at the beginning. And you know, I think we certainly understand the rationale and the intent of that. I think it's precisely to avoid situations like the one you're describing, where you've been in, you know, an entitlement or plan check process for a very long time, and then all of a sudden at the last second, here's fire or another agency saying, "Oh wait, do this," and you know, you're so deep into the way the project's designed, it's just not a feasible thing to do at that point. You know, coming from planning department staff and city staff, I know we would see that come up, and it puts everybody in a really, really challenging situation. So, you know, in trying to do more of the reviews and things early, I know that the broad goal is to avoid situations like that and provide everybody more certainty. You know, I think that goal makes sense. The flip side of that, certainly that we do hear sometimes from folks in the development community, is that also creates a different challenge in and of itself, because it's just so hard to get a complete application in that city staff will start working on because you're processing all of those referrals. So, I mean, I think in my view, the big picture goal remains a good one. We need to work through ways to make it work better. It is especially, you know, complicated for us with all of the different departments involved in development review, but it does seem like to the extent that we can set the requirements and sort of the, yes, this is your box, just keep doing this at the beginning, is simpler and better for everyone to avoid those late hits. The 12 to 2, it was, I wasn't with the city at that time, but that's an incredibly far-reaching and bold notion to try to do something like that. Even just talking about building and safety and planning and melding those two together would be an incredibly complex organizational and bureaucratic and institutional sort of thing to try to do. So I don't think anything of that scope is on the table right now, but I would say that I certainly know that the mayor is very, very focused on development services and on efficiencies between and among the departments. It's come up internally quite a bit recently, and it's something that we've already been very focused on within ED1 and ED7. So I think, you know, you can certainly expect that to be a big focus for our team in different ways to try to break down some of those, you know, silos and sort of fractured processes amongst the departments. There's also, you know, a lot of efforts that they're long lead time things and they don't happen overnight, but working through some of our city's technological infrastructure and systems, building in safety is in the process, and this may be music to yours and others' ears, of finally updating its permitting system, like the actual interface that customers and staff use for the first time since, I believe, the last century. And so that's going to be a huge deal. And as part of that too, and trying to coordinate with other city departments, so information on project status and permits is available in more of a centralized way so that both city staff and developers can go to fewer places to try to understand where things are at and work through the city departments to get there. And then to quickly touch on the last aspect about ED1, in terms of the temporary program, it really truly can only be for 100% affordable because of the, you know, authority upon which it rests. But, you know, that said, I do think that our broader goal in within the CHIP program and elsewhere of establishing more ministerial pathways for mixed income projects and other housing projects is absolutely a goal, it would be a big thing to sort of take that in super broad strokes, sort of in one fell swoop. But I think through these different programs, that's something that we're working towards achieving, sort of setting clear objective standards and then making the process simpler, not just for 100% affordable housing, but for mixed income projects as well.
The
I'd like to
process,
add-
yeah,
sorry,
go ahead.
I'd like to add on the plan check. So the plan check issues what has happened is, so you have two, in-house plan check and you farm it out. The issues come more when they are farmed out. They take a longer turnaround time, but they also come up with issues. And sometimes you wonder, is it because they need more business? But I'm not alluding to that. But here's the thing, you need standardization for plan check. You don't have standardization. You get one inspector or one supervisor, or when you're discussing the plans, and let me just go back. You need to increase the effectiveness of the one-stop, which is right in the beginning. Enlarge the one-stop to kill a lot of issues where in plan check that you're going to handle them, because what happens is one-stop is becoming sort of advisory, and in a lot of cases you feel in the one-stop you're not getting. One-stop, for those of you who don't know, is when you're going to start something, you go and you file for a one-stop, you pay the fees, and then you have a meeting with all different departments, and there could be 10, 12 of them. They'll all come in and give you a view on your proposed development. So you'll get the feedback. This needs to be expanded, where you get a lot of issues resolved in the one-stop, so that you reduce the plan check time, and then the plan check you have standardization, which will further reduce the time for you to get your permits.
We do have case management, and unfortunately, what we learn in case management doesn't always get transferred to the plan checkers. And then they'll say, oh, it's just an introductory review, and here are our thoughts, but you're on your own when you get to plan check. This is just our overview before. So we try and give our notes back to the building safety and planning, what we learned during case management, and then use that for during plan check. But I understand, and that would be great if we could get more input in case management.
Well, thank you. That was a great dialogue. Any other questions?
Sure. So, as Gabe knows, I oversee Metro's community relations for the Joint Development Program for our 10,000 units we're trying to build. So, when I think about all hell break loose, I actually think about the community. So, I'm curious from each of your vantage points what you think could happen. And I will say City of Los Angeles, because you're sitting in the Valley District Commerce Association here in LA. So, neighborhood councils, right? So, I mean, these are the things that talk about come in late when you're design, amenities, trees, parking, units, height, all the things that bring the community down. How can each of you, from your standpoint, help with that community education, awareness, visibility, any improvements on the neighborhood council system?
Can we get the folks in this room to join the neighborhood councils? Yes, right?
Yeah.
If you're crazy enough to do that, please do that. Because we do need help, right? We do need help. We do need help with people that understand more sides of it than just actually stopping change in their neighborhoods. And I never knew how many treasured community assets there were until I started talking to neighborhood councils. So, and I think they're important, right? It's important to have that feedback loop. It's important for those folks to be there. They serve an important point for sure. But we need more folks that kind of see all sides of it. And I think that would really help. Look, we engage them early and often. That's the only way to do it. Do I think it's the best way? Do I think that the system is the best way? Maybe not. But I mean, we're certainly not getting something approved unless we've got their support. So that's the way it is today. We make it work. Have we thought about reimagining it? I don't know if we're really in the position to do that necessarily, but we can start with getting more folks that can bring a more balanced perspective. That would be my suggestion tactically.
And I think, I mean, that's, I would say, a large reason why organizations like mine exist. That I think the early roots of the YIMBY movement were kind of, seeing, well, hey, these methods of participation are really skewed towards homeowners, older folks, higher resource folks who can spend their evenings at a neighborhood council meeting or can take all day to show up to a city planning commission hearing. And, let's get together and show that, any one community is, not just made up of folks who don't want to see more neighbors, but are also made up of folks who do want to see more neighbors. neighbors. And so I would say a large part of the DNA of our organization is community organizing to do just that. So, we have about 17, 18 chapters across LA County, and a lot of what we do is push people to join neighborhood councils, help them join neighborhood councils, try to get folks on local city planning commissions, turn up to support, whether it's projects, individual projects and policies all over the county. But I think it's about, I don't think it's necessarily always about getting around community support, but it's about, organizing folks to show that there are people out there, maybe a lot of people, who want to see more neighbors in their community.
And I guess so, just real quick to jump in, I just really, really appreciate those comments from both of you and from Azine. I mean, I think that, our office wants to always engage in a very holistic way across, all perspectives on these issues. They are really complicated. They affect people's neighborhoods. They affect the broader economic development of the city. So I think, our deputy mayor, our mayor definitely is very focused always on a very collaborative approach. I think that planning generally does a very good job with their community outreach. They're constantly, I think, striving to also be learning ways to be sure that it's as equitable as possible and that all folks have an opportunity to participate, especially when it's a department-driven thing. And we always really appreciate when our developer partners are out there doing the good work. And we also need the whole spectrum of voices out there to be heard, as others have shared. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for raising that issue. Question?
That's right up my alley. So yes, LA has a very high vacancy rate, but it's mostly in downtown. And look at the structures. The ones that are made of concrete, it is very, very expensive even to get one bathroom constructed, because cracking concrete and the issues that are involved with, before you even get there, you have to get an asbestos clearance, you have to get a lead paint clearance, and that itself could take you a long time. Secondly, and this is the major reason, offices are designed like, square, or the breadth of the building will be about 60 feet or 80 feet. Residential units are required to have a window in every bedroom. Because you can't get a window, and if you take a square office, like let's say you got an abandoned Walmart, well, not Walmart, let's take another big box. And how do you convert that to housing? Because you can have it on the periphery, but the internal areas would have to be used for something else. And that is where developers come up with a problem. When they look at cost per square foot, it goes very expensive, and then there's wastage of a lot of space. And then also understand your parking rules have not changed that dramatically, even with, cars on autopilot, where it was expected that you don't need any parking, you can just, call up a Uber. That hasn't happened as yet. Parking requirements are still almost the same, although they're not in transit, where you're next to a transit center, then of course the parking requirements come down. But the adaptive reuse that we call for office buildings, this is the biggest problem that you face, that how do you get the bedroom sited? And then the second one is the cost of redevelopment or rehabbing it. Just the plumbing cost, and which includes your drainage, is super high, and that is why developers don't go there.
I want to also lift up the city of LA here for the CPC recently adopting the new adaptive reuse ordinance. I think the city of LA, since 1999, the city of LA has been a leader in adaptive reuse. And I think the city is going as far as you can go with regulatory changes, right? In terms of what can zoning do, right? What kind of rules can we get at? So I think the city of LA is leading by example and taking us right to the very edge of what we can do from a regulatory perspective. I think the point now, we have to talk about financial incentives. We have to talk about tax structure. We have to talk about, things. I think that's really the next phase for us to talk about adaptive reuse viability.
Great, thank you.
So I'm going to start off a bit differently here. I work for State Senator Caroline Menjivar, and
Fellow Garcetti alum.
Thank you. One of the things that I would like to ask each of you is, I'm hearing a lot of actually interesting ideas for bill ideas. You talk about, well, this is something that needs to be legislated. This is something that would really be helpful. Eliminate, CEQA, eliminate the linkage taxes. Eliminating them is probably not realistic. Augmenting them is probably much more feasible. I would like to offer to each of you to please contact our offices. We have actually a form for legislative ideas. And right now, the session is over. The session's not going to be starting until January 1st. By that I mean 3rd. And this is the season, if you will, where we are looking for bill ideas. We're begging for them. Not quite that far. But what we want are bill ideas. And so things like this could be very, very helpful. And the question I would like to ask is regarding SB 35. You even mentioned that the big box stores or things like that can be changed into housing for unrealistic purposes, kind of costs and things like that. But wouldn't an SB 35 were designed to expedite purchasing and streamline the process from a state point of view, doesn't that help? Aren't there more SB 35 projects that should be or could be started?
I mean, I think SB 35 or SB 423, its successor, it's a great accountability tool, right? Once you're
Azim, would you mind giving a
Oh,
thumbnail description
sure.
for everyone's benefit?
Yeah. Sorry. So SB 35 and SB 423, basically, if a jurisdiction it's not meeting its annual RENA targets, annual housing production targets, this kind of streamlining tool kicks in which if you're not meeting your affordable housing goals, then there is a mechanism that kicks in which projects that are 50% or more affordable have to be approved ministerially, and there's like a whole long list of eligibility requirements. If you're not meeting your market rate goals, then a project has to be 10% affordable to qualify for this streamlined process. So, I mean, I think that's really where SB 35 or SB 423 comes in for me, and I think the tall threshold requirements are realistically going to limit like how many people are going to be able to take advantage of that, right? So it's like you can't use SB 35 on a site that's been occupied by tenants in the past 10 years, for example, right? So like that decade look-back period is, twice as long as what most jurisdictions require, which would be 5 years of a look-back period. The labor provisions are going to limit the reach of SB 35 or SB 423. Not that they're not useful, right? I would say those tools are really useful accountability mechanisms, but the myriad of threshold problems, I think, limit its kind of feasibility or applicability.
I think you need to look at the projects where that's been done. And I think built, hard to find, right? Entitled, there are a number of them. Burbank has, I think, at least 3 SB 35 entitlements, right? So Burbank falls into that category where they don't have a lot of affordable housing and they haven't produced a lot of housing, so they were ripe for that sort of entitlement. We've looked at a number of those that have hit the market because the projects from the sponsors, they didn't find them feasible, and really boiled down to very simply the labor provisions continue to make those projects unaffordable. And look, we're close with labor and we understand the provisions on that, but for a project like that, and particularly in housing, very, very challenging to make pencil. And for a lot of those projects, they had a good usable life before, right? And so it's not to say that the basis is nothing. In Burbank in particular, land is quite expensive, right? And the price that someone would be willing to transact on that land also still expensive. So I think that is really challenging, and that's what we've stumbled upon, right? Looking at those opportunities is that really it just boils down to labor in terms of the effectiveness of things like SB 35 and AB 2011, the same thing, right? Otherwise, I think you'd see those projects or in those bills exercised more frequently, and we know that that's a logjam at the state level. But say it here in this room, that's a huge challenge on those projects.
Do you think they could be augmented to become effective and accomplish the purpose for which they were originally written?
Of course, there's always hope, right? There's always hope. We're developers. There's always hope.
So
Absolutely.
SB 35 has achieved its purpose, and I'm aware of projects where SB 35 has been used. So I'm not aware of SB 35 where with SB 35 people have not made use of it. At least in my world, I'm not aware. But I think you were referring to adaptive reuse. You started with adaptive reuse, and you talked about that kind of those properties. The problem there is not SB 35. The problem is the floor plan and the layout of the property, which becomes a restricting feature to start off with. So SB 35 would come on, down the line, but really it's the layout of the property.
By the layout of the property, I'm going to try and use an instance that I'm familiar with. The Pickwick ice rink.
Sure.
That whole section down the range of Burbank was purchased for SB 35. I don't know, frankly, I don't know where it's at in the process, but purchasing vacant properties like that, you're saying are working or are caught up in, some of the mess that it was referring to earlier.
So I'm not aware of this particular one, but I said I'm not aware of SB 35 projects where it hasn't worked. But what I want to go back is where you've talked about purposing properties for a specific use. And as far as adaptive reuse is concerned, and I was only referring to the design, the construction of the property and for what you want to use it. We are talking about housing here. So you're trying to convert a commercial property. Remember, there's also some resistance from the city, and it's natural because they're going to lose sale tax revenue. Commercial properties fetch them sales tax revenue in addition to a proportion of property taxes, and we understand that in the development world. So when you don't see the city too enthusiastic, if they want a revenue neutral and they're going to lose the revenue from property A, they need the revenue to come up from somewhere else. And we are cognizant of that. So when we make suggestions, we do keep that in mind. But I am not aware of where it has been a problem, SB 35 itself.
I think we have time for one more question.
I've heard bureaucracy, standardization, compliance kind of brought up a few times, and that kind of being a huge hindrance there, as well as updating the infrastructure in the city. How are you guys using AI and all the new tools that are now available in cloud computing to be able to kind of augment your workforce, to be able to kind of reduce some of those barriers that you guys have?
I guess I can start there. We definitely do a lot, I would say, with cloud-based computing and things like that. There's a lot of ongoing, as I mentioned, as you referenced, technological upgrades and things that take a long time within our city processes to implement and bring online, but are coming in the years to come that I really think are going to make a significant difference. In terms of AI, I guess I would say for us, with how quickly we're able to move, it's still very early days. I know it's something that we're all kind of looking into. There aren't any specific initiatives or applications that I can really speak to just yet that we're using it for. But I mean, it's coming, it's here, it's going to be a big thing in the years ahead. I'm sure we'll continue to talk about it and see also with some of our longer, lead time tech upgrades where that might be able to be incorporated into it. So it's very exciting. I don't have too much to share specifically, but I know it's going to be a big part of what we're looking at over the next couple of years. Others.
So design of structures, engineering and architectural was on CAD/CAM, right? But now AI is being used where you can generate options for projects that you want based on criteria that is given. So before we even go for a plan check, there are options that a developer will already have, and that is because of AI. This didn't happen in the last 1 year. This has been going on for the last 5 years. So this cuts the lead time for the developer to get the project going. It also cuts the costs. So AI has been used, and it's not something recently that has come into architectural or engineering.
And we're also using it to check plans. I think that's going to be a huge frontier. We're running these programs where we'll check the plans in advance of submitting them so we can check code compliance and try to get in front of it. And we're already seeing a lot of benefit from that. It will generate a huge list of things that we need to adjust. And I think that's going to help us a lot on our side. But definitely in the engineering and architecture side of our business, we see a lot of change afoot there. And part of it is the way that the architecture and engineering firms are set up now, right? In terms of like architects being master thinkers about the project, but not always designing every detail and farming a lot of that out to sub-consultants and even down to the trades. And so their role is really ripe for a lot of quick AI. We're also using it in terms of generating layout plans. We have an in-house tool where we can kind of build our own multifamily layouts just on the development side, and then we run those through the architecture firms as well. But that's something we just started doing the last couple of years.
I just want to add here, construction defects is a big issue. That's why we came to SB 800 for developers. But construction defect forecasting by the use of AI in design and in designing projects, we actually look at modeling and cut and design projects where it is forecasting what all issues can arise from use of different materials, including sustainable materials that are still coming into housing development.
Thank you so much. Great topic. We're going to have to wrap up, and just to bring this all together, we tackled some really hard issues, but also had some optimism. So if you don't mind, a quick lightning round of what makes you feel optimistic in just a couple of words. Go down the line.
Sure, I'll just start. There's a ton of opportunity for growth. I mean, we're like as multifamily developers, the tailwinds for our product type are huge. The headwinds are strong as well, but I like to think that we've got more wind at our backs than in front of us. And I think just the amount of opportunity we have right now with the political will, everybody in this room thinking about how we can do what we do, best position to be in. So there is hope. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gabe, and I'd agree. I mean, I think we see a lot of stakeholder alignment around different issues that certainly wasn't there, 1, 5, 10 years ago. And in our office, I think sees a lot good coming out of planning, building, and safety, and also all of the work that we're able to do and have conversations like this and work with our various stakeholders and the folks here. I mean, I think there's a lot of good work and alignment on the task at hand and possible ways to approach it. It's challenging, but I also feel very excited.
Thank you.
I'm very optimistic because housing is now the #1 topic. Whether it's in Congress, Republicans and Democrats may not talk to each other on anything, but on housing, they will talk. And it's also in the state, and it's also everywhere. You'll find housing is dead center up front. And that makes it, these issues will get addressed. That's why I'm very optimistic.
And piggyback on that, I mean, the vice president talked about the need to reform outdated zoning regulations. If that doesn't make housing nerds excited, I don't know what will.
Thank you very much for that. That's all the time we have for today, and thank you so much to this incredible panel.
Thank you.
I want to thank again our track sponsors, Mission Community Hospital and Pacific Federal, and our panel sponsor, Southland Regional Association of Realtors. And the next panel starts at 11:15. Please use the time to visit the exhibitors, and thank you for your attention and all your.
Yes. Great moderation.
Yeah.
My briefcase.